بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So after last week we discussed, or after discussing last week the status and the fadail of the illustrious companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we move on this week to our second topic, which is the murder and the killing of Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu. And this was the first real fitnah that hit the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after he passed away, we know that Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu became the Khalifa. He became the first leader, the first Amirul Mu'mineen, the leader of the believers of this ummah. His caliphate reigned for how long? For approximately 1.5 years, right? Towards 2 years, and then he passed away, radiyallahu anhu. After that came Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiyallahu anhu, and he was Amir for about 10 to 11 years, and then he was martyred in the path of Allah. Umar ibn al-Khattab was leading the Salah as Amirul Mu'mineen. One day, Salatul Fajr, and he was attacked. And this is where someone by the name of Abu Lu'lu' al-Majusi, Allah's curse be upon him, he came and he stabbed Umar radiallahu anhu numerous times. While he was leading the prayer, he attacked Umar. It was this that eventually led to his death. So, on his deathbed, people now knew that he was going to pass away. And as he was on his deathbed, the Sahaba came to him and they requested from him and they asked him, who shall be the next Khalifa? Who does he, as the Khalifa, who does he recommend? Who does he request to take over? And this is where Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, and the hadith here is mentioned in Sahih Bukhari, a lengthy hadith that speaks about the killing of Umar radiyallahu anhu. And in this hadith, he is requested, and he says that I find that no one has more right to this affair than those individuals who, when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, he was pleased with them. And then he mentioned them and he said he is Ali radiallahu anhu, and Uthman, Zubair, Talha, Sa'd, and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. So Umar mentioned 6 names. And he says these 6, the Khalifa will have to come from them. And then eventually he passes away, radiallahu anhu. So after he was buried and after he was prayed upon, the Sahaba then gathered once again. The 6 of them had to gather, and now they had to decide who's going to be the next Khalifa. And this is where 3 of them decided that they're not going to take part in this, or rather they don't want a hand in the caliphate. So Zubair comes along and he says, جَعَلْتُ أَمْرِي إِلَى عَلِي, I leave my affair with Ali. Talha says, جَعَلْتُ أَمْرِي إِلَى Uthman. And Sa'd comes and he says, I leave my affair to Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. So there were 6 and now there's 3. We are left with Ali, Uthman, and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. The Khalifa had to come from one of them. What then happened was, they had a discussion, and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf basically says that he's not on the level of these 2. He's not equal to their virtue, so he leaves it to one of the 2. And it was left to him to decide who's going to be the Khalifa. So what he done then was, he says, he took about 3 days, and he went to all of the Sahaba, to the Muhajirin and the Ansar, and he says, Wallahi ma taraktu baytan min buyutil Muhajirin wal Ansar illa wasa'altuhum. I never left a house from the Muhajirin and the Ansar except that I asked them. Which means he went around and he knocked on their doors and he spoke to each one of them. And he says, فَمَا رَأَيْتُهُمْ يَعْدِلُونَ بِعُثْمَانِ أَحَدًا. I never came across any of them who considered anybody to be equal to Uthman. Meaning the Muhajirin and Ansar, they were both of the opinion that Uthman is the best after those who had passed away. So because of this, Abdurrahman ibn Auf says, I give you my allegiance. To who? To Uthman. After asking all the Sahaba. And then what does Ali do? He immediately gives his allegiance to Uthman. And he was completely happy and at ease with this and contented with this decision. And then all of the Muslims gave their allegiance to Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu. This in a nutshell is what happened after the death of Umar and how Uthman became the Khalifa. And how he became the Khalifa. Right? Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he says that there was no bay'ah. There was no allegiance given that was more assuring than the bay'ah of Uthman. There was no allegiance because every single one came together and they gave their bay'ah to Uthman. There was no bay'ah more assuring than this bay'ah. So the people, they came together and they gave their bay'ah to him. As he was the best of the Sahaba after Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu anhum. This is the view of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. As we mentioned this last week, that there is no ikhtilaf within Ahlul Sunnah over this issue. That the first was Abu Bakr and then Umar. There is no ikhtilaf on this. And then the vast majority gave preference to Uthman over the rest. And there's a hadith of Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma where he says that we did not give preference to anyone after the Messenger of Allah except that we gave it to Abu Bakr, then Umar, and then Uthman. He's speaking about the Sahaba. And then he says, and then we left the rest of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and we never ever discussed who was better than the other. So preference was given firstly to Abu Bakr, Umar, and then Uthman, and they left the rest as is. And this is why Imam Ahmad also said, rahimahullah, whosoever prefers Ali over Uthman, then he has belittled the Muhajirin and the Ansar. He has belittled the Muhajirin and the Ansar. Because clearly they were of the opinion that Uthman was the best. Right? Even better than the great Ali radiyallahu anhu. So the view of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that whoever prefers Ali over Abu Bakr and Umar, like for example the Shia, whoever prefers Ali over Abu Bakr and Umar, then he is misguided and he is an innovator in the religion of Allah. But whoever prefers Ali over Uthman, then we say he has erred. That such a person is incorrect. Because there were ulama, there were scholars that did prefer Ali over Uthman, but that is definitely the weaker view, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So quickly we ran through who was Uthman ibn Affan, his name, his lineage. He was Uthman ibn Affan, the son of Abil As, the son of Umayyah, the son of Ibn Abd Shams, the son of Abdi Manaf. And for those who are aware of this, the lineage of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you will know of Abdi Manaf. This is where Uthman, his lineage meets the lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by Abdi Manaf. Okay? His mother was Arwa bint Qurayz ibn Rabi'ah, and his grandmother was Hakim, the daughter of Abdul Muttalib. Who was Abdul Muttalib? Abdul Muttalib was the Prophet ﷺ's uncle or grandfather. Abu Talib was the uncle, Abdul Muttalib was the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ. Which means that the Prophet ﷺ's father and Uthman's mother were brother and sister. They were brother and sister, and therefore we find that the two of them are cousins. Abu Bakr, or rather Uthman and the Prophet ﷺ were cousins. They had the same grandfather who was Abdul Muttalib. Tayyib, what was Uthman's laqab? What was his nickname? What was he known as? Through the ummah, what do we know him as? His nickname is Dhun Nurayn, the possessor of two lights. Why was this? Because he was married to two of the Prophet's daughters, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the only person to have had this honor to marry two of the daughters of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's a narration where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if I had another one, I would have married them off to you as well. Right? Because this was the virtue of Uthman. This was the character of Uthman ibn Affan. So he was married to Ruqayyah binti Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After she passed away, he got married to her sister, who was Kulthum radiyallahu anha, the other daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As for his kunya, then he was known as Abu Abdullah, the father of Abdullah and the father of Amr. He took his Islam, or he became a Muslim in the early days of Islam. He was one of the first people to accept Islam, and it was none other than Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu that took his shahada, that gave him the da'wah and brought him into Islam. The great Abu Bakr was the first to accept Islam, and soon after that, many people accepted by his hand. Uthman ibn Affan was one of them. He also was of the Muslims who made hijrah twice in his life. So, of the first Muslims in Makkah, they faced great persecution from the Quraysh. And this is where the Prophet ﷺ advised them to make hijrah to Al-Habasha, to Ethiopia. And this is where Uthman and his wife Ruqayyah, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, they left and they made hijrah to Ethiopia. Eventually they returned because they were told that things are much easier, and they came back. And eventually the greater hijrah happened, where all of the Muslims eventually had to leave and they migrated to Al-Madinah. Uthman made hijrah both of these times, radiyallahu anhu. As for his fadl, as for the virtue of this man, radiyallahu anhu, there are so many narrations and so many incidents throughout history or throughout his life and during the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where we see the greatness of this man, radiyallahu anhu. We have a hadith where an incident had happened, the Battle of Tabuk. The Battle of Tabuk happened, and the army, they required financing. They required weapons and armory and this and that. The Prophet ﷺ then called out and said, who is there that's going to come and sponsor the army and give money to the troops? And he says that whoever sponsors the troops will be given Jannah. And this is where Uthman ibn Affan comes forth with 1,000 dinar in his pocket. He goes to the house of the Prophet ﷺ and he gives this towards the army of Tabuk. The Prophet ﷺ, he then says, مَا ضَرَّ ابْنَ عَفَّانَ مَا عَمِلَ بَعْدَ الْيَوْمِ, that nothing will harm Ibn Affan, nothing will harm Uthman ibn Affan after what he done today, or nothing that he does will ever harm him after what he did today. Because this was the weight of what he done on that day, because he gave them the victory basically by being the one who finances this army. And the Prophet ﷺ knew the greatness of this act, and he says that nothing will truly harm this man after this act of worship that he just did. So even though he was eventually murdered, the Prophet ﷺ knew what's coming. He was well informed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Uthman will face this, but he says nothing will truly harm him after this. So even though he's martyred, etc., it doesn't really harm him, because that was only a benefit for him. It was only a fadl for him, the fact that he was martyred in the path of Allah. Another hadith was where the Prophet ﷺ was sitting in one of the gardens of Medina, and someone comes and requests to enter, and he says, give him permission and give him the glad tidings of Jannah. In it comes Abu Bakr. The same thing happened, Umar came. The same thing happened with Uthman. Except that the Prophet ﷺ didn't just say, give him the glad tidings of Jannah, but he said, وَبَشِّرْهُ بِالْجَنَّةِ عَلَى بَلْوَى تَكُونَ. Give him the glad tidings of Jannah after a trial will befall him. And Uthman then said, oh Allah, make me of the steadfast. And in another nation he said, Allahul Musta'an. He said, Allahul Musta'an. Allah is the one who we seek help in. Because he knew that something was going to come in his life that's going to lead to his death, and it's going to be a fitnah. It's going to be this great trial and tribulation that he will go through. And he said, may Allah make me of the patient, and Allahul Musta'an. Another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ was standing on Uhud one day, with Abu Bakr, Umar and Uthman. And the mountain began to shake. Uhud began to shake and to tremble. And the Prophet ﷺ, he stamped his foot on the mountain and he said, Uskun or Uthbut ya Uhud. Be firm, O Uhud. فَإِنَّ عَلَيْكَ نَبِيٌّ وَالصِّدِّيقُ وَالشَّهِيدَانِ. Be firm, O Uhud, for verily upon you is a prophet. And a Siddiq, obviously Abu Bakr, and 2 martyrs, 2 shaheeds. And Uhud was firm. This obviously shows us the status of the 2 martyrs. They knew they were going to be martyred. Based on this hadith, they knew. We are the 2 shaheeds. Because we are not the Prophet, nor are we as-Siddiq. We are the 2 shaheeds, Umar and Uthman, radiyallahu anhuma. They knew they will be they will be martyred in the path of Allah. Other benefits that we know of, he was of the Ashara Mubashara, the 10 that was guaranteed Jannah. He was obviously the 3rd Khalifa, and there were many acts of worship that he done. It wasn't only the army that he sponsored, he also bought the well that the Prophet ﷺ requested, who will come and give this well, and he was the one who bought the well. He was the one who expanded Masjidul Nabawi later on when the masjid couldn't accommodate after people accepted Islam. He was the one who built on. The Prophet ﷺ requested, who is there that will build on, and he came forth and he expanded Masjidul Nabawi to cover and to be able to hold all of its worshippers. And there are many other incidents that show the status of this man, radiyallahu anhu. From the signs of prophethood was where the Prophet ﷺ, he spoke about a fitnah, a great fitnah that's going to befall the ummah. This great fitnah is going to befall his sahaba. And he says to them, هَذَا يَوْمَئِذٍ عَلَى الْهُدَى. This one on that day will be upon guidance. And he was pointed to none other than Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu. In another narration it says, or Abu Hurairah narrates, and we'll mention this later on, that he heard the Prophet ﷺ say that on that day of the fitnah, stick to Al-Amin and my companions. And Al-Amin on that day was Uthman, as the Prophet ﷺ pointed him out. Our last hadith, Aisha narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Uthman, in wallaka Allahu hadha al-amr yawman, when Allah bestows this affair on you, فَأَرَادَكَ الْمُنَافِقُونَ أَن تَخْلَعْ قَمِيصَكَ. The munafiqun are going to come and they're going to want you to remove this shirt. The Prophet ﷺ referred to a shirt, a qamis. الَّذِي قَمَّصَكَ اللَّهُ, the one that Allah adorned you with. فَلَا تَخْلَعْهُ. So don't remove that thing. This obviously referred to the caliphate. The fact that Allah made you the Khalifa, they are going to want to remove you, but don't ever take off that shirt which Allah bestowed upon you, which is the caliphate. طيب. So he becomes Amirul Mu'mineen. He becomes the leader of the believers. And in his reign, Islam spreads far and wide, such like it never spread before. Even more than in the time of Umar. They conquered Africa, they conquered many places. And Islam became stronger and stronger, and the area of Islam just expanded. And it was, 10, 12 years later of his caliphate that the fitna only started. So he was Amirul Mu'mineen for some time. It was in the year 34 after Hijrah that the fitna started, where people came and tried to rebel against Uthman ibn Affan and tried to remove him as the Khalifa of Islam. And the reasons for this fitna we will look at, because these are quite important to understand. How did this happen? What was the cause of this fitna? The cause for the fitna was for a number of reasons. Reason number 1 was the main reason, and that was none other than the Jew Abdullah ibn Saba. He was the main reason for the fitna. Abdullah ibn Saba, he was the cause for all of this. So Abdullah ibn Saba is a man who was a Jew, who came into Islam, and he acted to be as one of the Muslims. He acted as one of the Muslims. And he is a personality that we all agree upon that he existed. He was there. It is only some of the latter day Shia that came and claimed that Abdullah ibn Saba didn't exist. But as far as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah goes, then we are agreed upon this issue. The classical, the latter day scholars, the historians, all agree that Abdullah ibn Saba was there and he did what he did. In fact, even the classical Shia scholars have documented about Abdullah ibn Saba. Yeah, the book we're using is a book by Sheikh Uthman Khamis, and he mentions some narrations from their books. We will read just one. He says that Al-Kishi writes in his book that An Abi Ja'far, from Abu Ja'far alayhi salam, that Abdullah ibn Saba kana yadda'i nubuwah. He used to claim to be a prophet. Abdullah ibn Saba, this is from the Shia book. That Abdullah ibn Saba used to claim prophethood. And he claimed وَيَزْعُمُ أَنَّ أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ هُوَ اللَّهِ. He also claimed that Amir al-Mu'mineen is referring to who? To Ali, the Shia book. That the true Amir al-Mu'mineen, he claimed was Allah. Abdullah ibn Saba claimed he was a prophet, and Ali was Allah. This is found in the Shia book, a classical Shia book. Right? So even the classical scholars agreed. So there's no need for us to even bother with these latter-day Shia scholars who came and said, no, Abdullah ibn Saba is someone that's made up. His personality was something that's made up. We completely reject this. They are trying to defend their little cult, and that is why they are making these claims in reality. So Abdullah ibn Saba, there is a sect known as the Saba'iyah. It's named after him. The Saba'iyah. There are those who believe that Ali is Allah. There are those who believe that Ali is Allah. Right? So, what Abdullah ibn Saba wanted was that Uthman must go and Ali must take over. That's what he wanted, because they believed in Ali. So he needed Uthman out of the picture. And this is where he started to mastermind a plan against Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu. Right? And I'm going to pause here. We'll come back to Abdullah ibn Saba shortly. We'll just mention quickly some of the other issues that arose that added to the fitna. That added to this fitna and allowed it to build. So, for example, there was the issue of al-Rakha, which is that the ummah at that time, because it spread so much, because it became so strong, it was the first time Islam was so broad and so vast and so many people came into Islam and they conquered so many lands, there was a feeling of prosperity, of ease. They won so much of jihad that people were just given things for the first time. Take your share of the wealth, take your share of this that was won, take your share of that was won. So what was the result of this? The result of this was that the people became very laid back. They became people of complaints. For the first time, there were people who, they were looking for more. They were not thankful anymore. They didn't accept anything anymore. They were always nagging and complaining for more. The ulama say this added to the fitna. Because they were of this state, they were not like the Sahaba, who worked hard, who strove for what they had. And they were firm in their knowledge and they were firm in their belief. These people they didn't have the knowledge and the experience of the Sahaba. So they were easily corrupted. Right? The ulama say that that befell the ummah, this only added to the fitna. This made things worse because they were, you could say, vulnerable. Because they weren't, people who stood up and worked and believed and really were firm in their knowledge, etc. Right? He says, or another example, or another reason was the difference between the nature of Uthman and the nature of Umar. We know Umar was shadid. He was extremely firm. And he didn't tolerate any nonsense. Any nonsense, nothing was tolerated in the time of Umar. Whereas Uthman was extremely forbearing. He was very forgiving. He would allow things and just let it slide. People would, do something wrong and he let it slide. And they would do something and he would forgive them and let it slide. Right? He himself said on the day that when he was besieged, right? He said, do you know what has allowed him to do this to me? He said, the only thing that allows us is hilmi, the fact that I am so soft and forbearing. That's why this basically was allowed to happen, because of his nature. In fact, the son of Umar, he says, Wallahi laqad naqamu ala Uthman ashya. Things were used against Uthman for what he did. You know, people used to accuse him of things and say this about him and say that about him. And it was used against him. He says, لَوْ فَعَلَهَا Umar. Had Umar been the one who did these things that they are using against Uthman, مَا تَكَلَّمَ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدٍ. Abdullah ibn Umar says, not one of them would have said anything. Not one of them would have uttered a word, because it was Umar. And that was his personality. They were too scared to say anything. They were too scared to, try and belittle him or try to turn people against him, etc. But with Uthman, they knew they could get away with this, right? Because he was so forgiving, etc. Another reason is that there were many people who accepted Islam, especially those who, for example, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, people became murtad. People left the deen of Islam. What happened? Abu Bakr waged war against these people. So some of them were killed, and many of them turned back to Islam. Some of them turned back to Islam out of satisfaction. They were happy with it. Others turned back to Islam because they were afraid. They didn't really want to be Muslim, but they were afraid of this onslaught, and they became Muslim. So they had a hatred against the Quraysh. Because they were Muslims, they were Arab. But to them, why must the Khalifa always be from Quraysh? Why Quraysh? And this also led to them having something against Uthman. It was again a Qurashi that was Amir. It was not from their tribes. And this always happens. Tribalism is a problem, right? And this was one of the reasons. But the main reason at the end of the day, as we said, was Abdullah ibn Saba. And what he did, and what his plan was, to remove Uthman ibn Affan. So, what he eventually did was, it was all propaganda. In reality, it was all propaganda. What Abdullah ibn Saba did was, he would have people that were with him. Obviously, he first would give da'wah to people, build a little bit of a cult, build a rebellion, and they would work together. So what they did was, they created rumors. That Uthman said this, Uthman commanded this, Uthman assaulted Ali, Uthman did this to Aisha, Uthman did this to Talha, Uthman did this to Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and they spread rumors. Right? They spread rumors to people. Not to the Sahaba. Not to the Sahaba. They spread rumors to those outlying areas like Egypt, like Kufa and Basra. These were the places that he targeted. The places that were eventually conquered. There were people there like Sahaba who were ruling over them. It was the youngsters, the newer reverts that he targeted. And he used to, because they didn't have knowledge. They didn't have much knowledge. This is how he won them over. So he would go and he would claim things and he would say things. And he would accuse Uthman of doing this and doing that. And he would send riders out. Someone would come and he would come with his horse and into a village. And this rider would be, moving around frantically until the people stopped him and asked him, what are you up to? What's wrong? And he would eventually say, no, Uthman did this. That's why I'm so frantic. And Uthman commanded this. And this would incite the people. The people became crazy. And the people became full of rage. Eventually, in the 34th year after Hijrah, they marched towards Medina. They come towards Medina, one from Kufa, one from Basra, and what happens? Uthman himself, he goes out to meet them. He takes who? He takes Ali radiallahu anhu with him. He goes with them, and he speaks to them. He says to them, what's the issue? You come from so far here, what's the issue? And everything that they say and claim, he disproves them. He refutes them. And he has Ali there to refute them. They quote from the Quran and the Sunnah and they refute them. So much so that these people accept what was said by Ali and Uthman. And they leave Medina. So Abdullah ibn Saba is sitting there and he sees his plan failing. He sees that his plan has as failed as the people. Eventually they accepted and they left. What Abdullah ibn Saba then does is, he writes letters. He writes letters from Uthman, and from Aisha, and from Ali, and from Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and he writes letters, fake letters, claiming that this is from Ali, claiming that this is from so-and-so, to the amirs of these places, meaning Kufa and Basra and Misr, where these people came from. He writes letters towards these people, from the name of Ali and Uthman, and he even forged a stamp, like the stamp that Uthman had. Uthman used to have a stamp that he used to stamp his letters with. As the Amir, he even forged this, and he used to stamp these letters. And he sent these letters out. That these people who rebelled, these people who came, when they come back, you must kill them. They must be killed. So when these people heard of this, they became they lost it completely. And this is where they then marched all the way back to Medina. They came all the way back to Medina. So a group from Kufa, a group from Misr, a group from Basra came. And now they were having nothing. They wanted Uthman out, or they were going to kill him. And this is basically what Abdullah ibn Saba conspired amongst the people. This was his plan, this is what he did. And this was eventually what happened. And then they came all the way back to Medina, and it is said that they were about 6,000. 2,000 from Kufa, 2,000 from Basra, 2,000 from Egypt. Other historians differed and said there were 2,000 altogether. Allah A'lam, we don't know the exact number. However, the scholars have said that they must either then be from either 2,000 altogether, or there were 6,000 altogether, or there was somewhere in between. So there was somewhere in between 2,000 and 6,000, and Allah knows best. This is the group that came to assassinate or to remove Uthman ibn Affan from the caliphate, right? So what then happened was they surrounded his house. There was a siege on his house, and for 40 days this happened. For 40 days he remained in his home. He was unable to come out. He could not even go to the masjid to make salah. He couldn't leave his house at all. So for 40 days they laid siege. They laid siege to his house. He couldn't leave, nothing could happen. Right? People were allowed in. So many of the Sahaba would come, they would speak to these people, and they refused to listen. Many of the Sahaba would come and speak to Uthman and say, let's fight against these people. You have the right to fight against these people. And Uthman refused. He refused to allow this to happen. Right? So, as he was now, in the state, things were getting, more severe with these people. And he would go out and speak to them. The Sahaba would speak to them, but they refused to listen. So for us, there's a great lesson in this. There's a great lesson that we can derive from this incident. And that is, you have, the great people of that era, they are around. You have the scholars of the Ummah, they are around. Who are the scholars of that time? Who were the scholars of that time? The Sahaba. They were the Sahaba was there. Ali radiallahu anhu, he was there. Mughira ibn Shu'bah was there. Abdullah ibn Umar was there. Anas, they were all there. They were all alive. They were the best of the best. They are proven by the Quran. These people knew their virtue. Imagine they met the Sahaba. They knew the virtue of these people. But when the fitna happened, they were blinded by rage and by jahl, by their ignorance. They were blinded by this propaganda that happened. And all they could see was, we must get rid of the leader, we must overthrow the leader, or he must be killed. And this is where khuruj and rebellion took place. And this is now the first group of Khawarij that the Ummah has seen of Islam. This is the first group of the Khawarij. Who is the Khawarij? They are the sect that the Prophet ﷺ spoke about. We have many ahadith with the Prophet ﷺ. He speaks about deviant groups in general, sects that will come up, 72 sects. And when you see many ikhtilaf, stick to the sunnah, etc. But there's only one group that he mentioned by name. He mentioned the Khawarij. And that is because they are so dangerous. And because they are not clearly upon or as clear upon misguidance as many of the other sects. If you look at the Shia, you can see this is clearly misguidance. You look at the grave worshipper, you can see this is Allah says, worship me alone, you worship other than Allah. It's clear misguidance. You look at the Ahmadi, you look at the Qur'ani, you look at all these people, it's clear-cut misguidance. You sit with the Khariji, he will quote to you only from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. He will use Qur'anic ayat against you. He will use Sunnah against you. He will use the Salaf against you. And this is why they are so dangerous. And this is why, to this day, many of the youth fall victim to this. Many of the youth who want to follow the Qur'an and the Sunnah fall victim to this. Because they are thrown verses of the Qur'an and they fall victim to this. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ highlighted this group. And he mentioned them to be people who read Qur'an, and they make Qiyamul Layl, and they fast. They are people of worship, meaning they are people who worship Allah severely, even more severe than you probably, because they are extreme even in their worship. This is how they are. So when you see them, you see men with beards, and they look like they're upon the Sunnah, and they look. But this is where the Prophet ﷺ warned against them. And he said they are young in age, and he mentioned they are dogs of the hellfire. And wherever you find them, kill them. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned them in many ahadith. This was the first group of Khawarij. What does Khawarij mean? It comes from the word kharaja or khuruj, those who make khuruj, which means those who leave the main body of the Muslims and rebel against the leader of the Muslims. He leaves this is the ummah. We have the leader, we have the main body of the Muslims. The Khawarij is that group who moves out and they want to fight against the Muslims. They want to remove the leader. This is basically how the Khawarij work. These were the first Khawarij in the history of Islam. So from their traits is, they always have an issue with the Amir. First and foremost. The Muslim leader is never good enough. The Muslim leader is an oppressor, he is a kafir, he is this. Also from their traits is takfir. They are very quick to make takfir. Once they make you a kafir, they are allowed to kill you. This is their manhaj in a nutshell. And this is what they saw in Uthman. They accused Uthman of kufr. Uthman radiallahu anhu, guaranteed Jannah, they accused him of kufr. So the question is, what then about the Amirs who came after Uthman? There will never be an Amir on the status and the level of Uthman ibn Affan ever again. And there never has been since his death, radiallahu anhu. What about our leaders of today? Can they come near to Uthman? The virtue of Uthman? They are not worth the dust under the feet of Uthman ibn Affan. But yet, the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba in that case, they taught us a methodology. And that is, we don't criticize the Amir. We don't look to overthrow the Amir. We don't look to just replace the Amir. And we will see quickly a narration of Ibn Umar as well, where he mentions this. And the Prophet ﷺ says in a hadith, عَلَيْكُمْ بِالسَّمْعِ وَالطَّاعَةِ. Upon you is to hear and obey. It's referring to the Amir, not to Allah and the Messenger yet, but here is referring to the Amir. And he says, وَإِن جَلَدَ ظَهْرَكَ وَأَخَذَ مَالَكَ. Even if this Amir, he flogs your backs and he steals your wealth, you must hear and you obey. Meaning, even if the Amir is an oppressor, even if he is a major sinner, even if you see him as a zalim, upon you is to hear and obey. This is a hadith in Sahih Muslim of the Prophet ﷺ, and there are numerous ahadith like this. There are incidents of the Salaf al-Salih as well. Hassan al-Basri with al-Hajjaj, when he used to slaughter Sahaba. He killed Sahaba, he killed Muslims. He killed them in Makkah, in the Haram. People came to Hassan al-Basri, why are we not going to fight this Amir? Hassan al-Basri said, have patience, work on yourself. These people went to make khuruj and they were slaughtered, and they were killed, because they didn't take the advice of Hassan al-Basri. This is the way of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? And the incident here teaches us a great lesson, that we need to always go back to the ulama in times of fitnah. When there is fitnah and things are unclear, you go back to the scholars of the ummah. If you don't go back to the scholars of the ummah, chaos will follow. And this is exactly what happened with the Sahaba. With these people rather. The Sahaba were there. The Sahaba were speaking to them, were trying to reason with them. They refused to listen and they did their own thing. And again the question is, who were the scholars from amongst them? They had no scholars with them. If you look into the world today, you see the exact same thing. You have people that are accusing the Muslim leaders of kufr, even though the Muslim leaders are far from perfect, accusing them of kufr. They must be overthrown. This must be happening. Khuruj must take place. But you ask the question, you look at these various groups that we see in the world, from all, where are these scholars? Who are these scholars? And the reality is that they have none. What scholar is with them? They have not one scholar with them. And this is the greatest proof against them. If you want to know, are they wrong? Where are the ulama? Because Allah says in the Quran, when there's fitna, you go back to Ahlul Ilm. You go back to the people of knowledge. They have no scholars with them. The same like this first group of Khawarij. They had no scholars with them. The scholars were all against them. And they were the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So the people of fitna, they never go back to the correct people who are the scholars of Ahl, and they don't acknowledge the true scholars. And this is clear to this day, and this is the greatest lesson that we can take from this incident. So what happened after this was, many of the Sahaba came to defend Uthman. And the narration of Ibn Umar, as I mentioned, was where Uthman says to Ibn Umar, do you see these people, what they want? They want me, to give up the Khilafah. And he asks him, should I do this? And Ibn Umar says to him, will you remain in this world forever? And he says to Ibn Umar, of course, no, I will not. So then he says, don't give it up. Because if you give this up, this will become a sunnah. This is going to become a sunnah. فَتَكُونُ سُنَّةً كُلَّمَا كَرِهَ قَوْمٌ خَلِيفَتَهُمْ. Every time a people dislikes the Khalifa, أو إمامهم خَلَعُوا. Every time they dislike the Imam or the Khalifa, they will go and just ask him to give it up, or expect him to give it up. And they will go there to overthrow. So he says, Ibn Umar advised him, don't give it up. Don't kill yourself, don't give it up. Rather stand against them. Because if you give this up, it will become a sunnah. That every time people dislike the leader, they will expect to just come there and take it away. But rather you stand against him and you make this the way that it will be. So, it's not for the Muslim leader just to stand and say, okay, these rebels, we give it up. Or I'm going to save my life and give it up. Rather, he's supposed to stand firm. And if there's need, or if it's in the better interest to fight them, then he may fight them. But with Uthman radiallahu anhu, he refused to fight these people. He refused to fight these people. And this was for a number of reasons. Right? He refused that anyone fight on his behalf. Many of the Sahaba, Mughira ibn Shu'bah, Abu Hurairah came, Ali came, Hassan and Hussein, the grandsons of the Prophet ﷺ, they came to defend Uthman and many others. And he basically chased them all away. And he said straight, no one is going to fight for me on this day. And there are narrations that I can read, but for time I don't want to get into it. We'll read one. He said, Abdullah ibn Amir ibn Rabi'ah says, I was with Uthman in his house, and he said that every person, man ra'a anna alayhi sam'an wa ta'atan. Look at his words. He says, each person who understands that it's upon him to hear and obey. It's upon them to hear and obey, because I'm the Amir. They must listen to me, they must obey me. إِلَّا كَفَّ يَدَهُ وَسِلَاحَهُ. He must give up his sword and whatever else he has. So he commanded them with this. Put down your swords, put down everything, no fighting is going to take place. And this was for a number of reasons. Number one, and he obviously didn't give up his khilafah. Why? Because of the hadith that we mentioned earlier. The Prophet ﷺ told him, this fitna is going to happen, the munafiqun are going to come and they're going to want you to give up the shirt that Allah adorned you with. Don't give it up. Referring to the caliphate. So that's why he never gave it up. He obeyed the Prophet ﷺ. Secondly, he knew what's coming to him. He knew that his death is going to come shortly. He was well aware because the Prophet ﷺ informed him that you are going to be killed, madhluman, unjustly you are going to be killed. And you are going to be into Jannah because of the affliction that befell you. He knew that this was it. So, he felt, why should it be that everybody has a big war here and I'm still going to die? They're going to fight for who? They're going to fight for me. So what's going to happen? Many of the Sahaba are going to be killed. Because at that time, the Sahaba were not even 1,000. Because, number one, it was during the time of Hajj. So these people came in during that waqt of Hajj. Many of the people of Medina went for Hajj. Many of the people of Medina went for Hajj. So Medina was, short of number. And the Sahaba who were there were willing to defend him. And these people came with armies from abroad. So they were about, as we said, between 2,000 and 6,000. It is said that the Sahaba commanded at least 700 of their sons to defend Uthman. So there were 700 of the sons of the Sahaba that were there willing to fight for him. He chased all of them away. Because he wanted no bloodshed to happen due to him. For them to protect him, he refused for this. Because he knew in the end he's going to die. So whether there's bloodshed or not, he's going to die. So therefore he did not want to be the cause of bloodshed. And he did not want to allow the sanctity of Medina to be tainted with this bloodshed. Imagine all of this happening right next to Masjid al-Nabawi. The Muslims fighting others who are supposed to be Muslims. Right? So this is why he refused and he never allowed anybody to fight. There were of the Sahaba who still did fight. They did put up a small fight. But in general, they were not allowed to fight. There are claims, for example, that must be clarified that Sahaba were involved in this. Sahaba were involved in the killing of Uthman ibn Affan. The truth is that there was not one companion that fought and that stood against Uthman ibn Affan. Not one Sahabi of the Prophet ﷺ stood against Uthman ibn Affan. Also, people use Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr as to say he was a companion, the son of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Muhammad, the son of Abu Bakr. But firstly, he was not a companion. Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr was not a companion. Secondly, what happened with him was, he was with these people initially. He was with these people initially. And he entered into the house of Uthman. And he grabbed Uthman by the beard. And Uthman radiallahu anhu, with all of his calmness, he said to him, you have grabbed the beard that your father used to honor and love. And immediately he let go, and it was as if he woke up from a shock. Because he realized that this is the beard that my father loved and honored. Not only my father, the Prophet ﷺ loved this beard and honored, and he left and he never came back. So Muhammad, the son of Abu Bakr, was initially there. These rumors came to him and he possibly believed them. But when he stood in front of Uthman and this incident happened, he completely left and he was not involved in the killing of Uthman radiallahu anhu. So what happened then was, eventually for 40 days he was not allowed to come out. He was not allowed to even drink water. He was not allowed a drink of water radiallahu anhu. And he comes out and he addresses these people. And he says to them, I advise you to give up your swords. Do not fight. Do not spill the blood of a Muslim. Because the blood of a Muslim is haram. And he says, I advise you to give up fighting because I am the Khalifa. And I am the one who expanded this masjid when the Prophet ﷺ sought one to expand this masjid. Do you not know that I am this person? They said, we know. He said, do you not know that I am the one who built that well? They said, we know. He says, and you deny me this water? And I am the one who built this well? He said, we know. And he mentioned many things. He established the proof against them. He established the proofs against him. I am the one who did this. Do you know this? Yes, we know. But they refused to listen. They refused to take heed. And eventually, after 40 days of laying siege to his house, they entered his house one by one. And the first one to strike him, they cut off his hands. And he said to them, firstly he said to them, between me and you is the book of Allah. Because he was sitting and he was reciting Quran. It was said that for 40 days, he was fasting, radiallahu anhu. And on that day he was killed, he had a dream where he saw the Prophet ﷺ and he saw Abu Bakr and Umar. And they said to him, today, aftir bina. Today you are breaking your fast with us. So he knew that on that day, this was the day he was going to be killed. It was the day he went out and he spoke to them. This was the day they came in, they cut off his hand. And he said to this man, by Allah, you cut off the first hand that wrote down the Mus'haf of Allah. It was his hands that wrote down the Quran. He says to him, you just cut off the hand of the first hand that wrote down the words of Allah. And then they came and another one hit him and another one chopped off and eventually he was killed. Radiallahu anhu. It was this where his blood was spilt on the Quran. His blood was spilt on the Mus'haf. Aisha radiallahu anha, she comes from Hajj and Amra bint Arta'ah, she's with Aisha and she says, as we coming into Medina from Hajj, we saw the Mus'haf. We saw the Mus'haf and the blood was spilt on the ayah in Surah Baqarah, فَسَيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. Allah will suffice you over them. Allah will be sufficient for you against them. This is where the blood spilt. And this is a narration where she says they were with Aisha and they saw this Mus'haf. And then she says, فَمَا مَاتَ مِنْهُمْ رَجُلٌ سَوِيًّا. Not one of these people who killed and fought against Uthman had a good death. All of them had an evil and disastrous death. As a punishment by Allah for fighting one of his beloved slaves, the Khalifa of Islam, Uthman ibn Affan. There's a narration of Ibn Sirin, the Tabi'i. He says, one day I was making tawaf of the Kaaba and he hears a man say, Allahumma ghfirli wa ma adhunnu an taghfira li. This man is saying, oh Allah forgive me, although I believe that you will never forgive me. Oh Allah forgive me, although I believe you will never forgive me. So Ibn Sirin says to him, oh slave of Allah, I'm hearing something that I've never heard before. What kind of dua is this? Oh Allah forgive me, but I believe you'll never forgive me. The man says, I took a covenant and a promise with Allah that if I ever meet Uthman, I will slap him. So he says when Uthman was killed and he was left there on his deathbed, people were coming and making salah and making dua for him. And I came in and I waited till there was nobody around and I slapped the face of Uthman on his deathbed. وَهُوَ مَيِّتْ, as he was dead, فَيَبِسَتْ يَدَيْهِ. And my hand became dried out and hardened. Ibn Sirin says, I looked at his hand and it was like a dried out piece of wood. His hand was like a dried out dark piece of wood. And this was again the curse of Allah upon this man for slapping the face of Uthman on his deathbed. Ibn Sirin narrates this issue, the story that happened. Right? So this was what happened with Uthman ibn Affan. And it was after this, of course, that the fitna got worse. The fitna got worse because now you had the crew of Abdullah ibn Saba. On the one hand, you had these Khawarij. These Khawarij were not believers in Abdullah ibn Saba. They were not believers necessarily in Abdullah, but they fell for the rumors. They fell for the propaganda. That's all he did. As for his beliefs, they were building on the side there. So the Shia belief was building on the side there with Abdullah ibn Saba. Then you had the Khawarij building on the other side. And then was, after this death, obviously the fitna grew. And now Ali became Amirul Mu'mineen. And that issue will be discussed more in detail next week, bi'idhnillah. About Ali and what happened between, catching the killers of Uthman with Muawiyah on one hand, who was a close family of Uthman. Also what happened is, when they entered the house and they started to attack him, one of his wives, Na'ilah, she came. She tried to defend her husband Uthman, and they chopped off some of her fingers as well. So it was said that she sent these fingers to Muawiyah to say this is what happened. Yes, these things. And I think they were related. They were cousins or something to that effect. And this obviously enraged Muawiyah because he loved Uthman. This was his cousin that he was married to. She was also hurt. Then he came to Medina, and all of this happened afterwards. Right? This will be bi'idhnillah. We discussed next week, insha'Allah ta'ala. How are we doing for time? Hour? I think that more or less covers most of what happened. There are obviously details that I may have left out here and there. But, wallahu Wallahu a'lam, I think that covers most of it. For example, there were, Aisha narrates that people accused her of writing against Ali, or writing against Uthman, that she wrote against Uthman, that this must happen. And she speaks out against this, and there are narrations of her speaking and saying that I never wrote down a word against Uthman. Right? So all of the companions, these are doubts and lies that you will find that people use and say, no, the Sahaba and Ali and Aisha, they were all against Uthman. These are all lies. Right? They obviously have been proven wrong and proven to be lies, that this never ever took place. Right? And there are many issues that they use against him. For example, the issue of the fact that he did not fight in the battle of Badr. The issue of that he left and he fled from the battle of Uhud. Right? There are many issues that they used against Uthman. But all of these things were disproven. They were disproved by the companions themselves. There's a narration in Bukhari, a person came to Makkah and he said to these Quraysh, where are your shaykh? Who's your shaykh? And they said, Abdullah ibn Umar is our shaykh. And this person went to him and said, I want to ask you certain things. And he started to speak about Uthman. And he says to Abdullah ibn Umar, do you know that Uthman fled from Uhud and he didn't fight in Badr? And he mentions a number of things. Abdullah ibn Umar answers him on each of these things. So again, this shows that these people, they fell for all of the propaganda. They fell for all of the rumors that were spread, for all of the lies that were said about Uthman. And to them, they felt like they had knowledge on the issue. They felt like, no, we have proof that he is deviant. We know that he is deviant. But when they went to sit with the scholar, with the real sheikh, he was able to clarify these issues for them. So in today's day and age, it's exactly the same. There is propaganda going around. There is false news going around. There is lies and rumors being spread all the time. And that is why the view of Ahlul Sunnah was, firstly, khuruj is haram. It is not allowed to rebel. Secondly, it is not allowed to speak against the Amirul Mu'mineen. For simple reasons is that it leads towards khuruj. When you start speaking, let's say we all live in a Muslim country and we have a leader, and we all start bad-mouthing the scholars, or the scholars start bad-mouthing the Amir, and the people start bad-mouthing, what's the end result with this? The end result is khuruj. This is where you incite people against the Waliyul Amr, against the leader of the Muslims. And the end result of this is, you have people will be growing, and people will talk and talk and talk. More and more anger will spread. Eventually we decide as a group, we are going to remove the Amir. We're going to overthrow this government. And what's the end result of that? It's bloodshed, it's chaos, it's complete chaos. And you look into history of countries recently and classical examples where countries went, completely to the dogs because of this methodology, where the economy fell. Women during these revolts were raped. This happened recently, now a few years ago, where women are raped because during the revolt there's so much chaos. Shops are looted, people are shot and killed, it's all chaos that results from this small or this ideology. And this is why the wisdom in this ruling of Ahlul Sunnah is that these things are nipped in the bud. That we don't speak against the Amir. Rather, we make dua for him. If we see his errors, it's clear to see our methodologies, we make dua for him. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, Imam of Ahlul Sunnah, he said that if I had one dua left in my life that I knew will be accepted, I will use that dua for the Muslim leader. That Allah rectifies him, that Allah keeps him firm, that Allah uses him for good. Because the ulama understood that if the leader is right and just, then everything will fall into place. The state will be handled properly. But if he's not, then things won't go that well. So this is why we make dua for him. This is why we make dua for him. And the understanding of the scholars is also that if you want a better leader, then rectify your affairs. If each person rectifies his own affair, in his home, with his friends, with his community, with his area, areas will come right, naturally the state will come right, and Allah will give you better. And Allah will replace that leader with better, or He will guide that leader. This is the way of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. This is the way of the righteous predecessors. It was never ever to take up swords and to start creating chaos and fawda, because this was not the way. And this was clearly not the way of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And from the traits of these people is that they see no good. They see no good. So, with all that ahadith that praised Uthman, with the Sahaba praising him, he was the one where, the Prophet ﷺ was sitting one day with his thigh open, Abu Bakr came in, Umar came in, and he remained seated in that way. Aisha narrates a hadith. And when Uthman comes in, he immediately pulled himself straight, and he straightened his clothing, and he covered himself up. I says, my father came in, Umar came in, and you didn't change your condition that you were in. But when Uthman came in, you quickly covered yourself up. Why would you do such a thing? What's the status of Uthman? And he said, shall I not be shy of a man who even the malaika of Allah are shy of? This was the status of Uthman. That he had so much haya, he had so much humility, he had so much shame, his adab, his character was such that the Prophet ﷺ was shy of him. The companions were shy of him. The malaika were shy of this man. Can you imagine someone that you can think of people that you may know? If I think of certain ulama that you meet, great scholars, when you meet them you are shy. Because you know the status of this person. You're shy, you sort of lose your words maybe. You don't know what to say to him because he's a great man of status. The malaika was shy like this of Uthman ibn Affan. But these people were blinded so much by hate and rage and a thirst for blood that they had no shyness for this man. So much so that they deprived him of water, they deprived him of everything until they murdered him. And they made him a shaheed in the end, radiyallahu anhu. Right? And that is our Khalifa, that is our Amirul Mu'mineen, that is the story of his killing. The main ibrah and lesson that we derive from this is this manhaj of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah with regards to returning back to ulama. Knowing who the scholars are. In times of fitna, the scholars are the ones who understand the fitna best. It's not the one who's full of speech, who can shout loud and who seems to be brave, and it's not them that know much. It's the ones those real trusted guys who are there, that passed the fatwa year in year, that have studied the deen year in year, they are the ones that you go back to in times of fitna. Because they are the ones that will be able to understand the matters of fitna. It's not the youth, etc. And secondly, the issue of khuruj and the dangers of khuruj. And also obviously the dangers of Shi'ism, because this was the founder of Shi'ism that masterminded this whole plot. This whole thing was masterminded by this man, Abdullah ibn Saba, the Jew, that this was the founder of Shi'ism as well. These are the main core lessons that we derive from this incident in history that happened. We wrap up here and we continue next week, bi'idhnillah, with Sheikh Yasin. He will continue with what happened after that and eventually with the rise of Shi'ism. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. If there's any questions you can ask.